So we've been discussing in Yani mitzvahs ben adam chavero, and we know, as we've spoken about many times, is the kedusha Yisrael of the individual Jew, as well as we know as Klal Yisrael is like mitzvah derabim. We know, as let's say the Gemara tells us in Moed Katan Daf Yudaled about when you have Avelis coinciding with Yantiv. So the Gemara says there is no Avelis on Yantiv because the mitzvah derabim of Simchas Yantiv beats out the mitzvah diyachid of your personal, your private Avelis. And we pointed out that the Machlokes Rambam and Tosfos, according to Rambam, they're both deraisa, and therefore the deraisa derabim beats out both Avelis, Yom Rishon's deraisa, and Simchas Yantiv's deraisa, and therefore that's why there's no Avelis. And the Tosfos holds they're both derabanan. Avelis is only derabanan, and Simcha is only derabanan. So however you learn it, that there's no Avelis on Yantiv. So, and the Tosfos points out that you have even the power of a mitzvah derabim, even on a mitzvah derabanan, even on a rabbinical mitzvah, that we say that according to some Rishonim, even on a mitzvah derabanan derabim, you could beat out a mitzvah deraisa. So we know there's the concept of Klal Yisrael as an individual, and Klal Yisrael as part of the rabbim, and we know we have the concept of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh, that all Jews are responsible for one another. In fact, according to the many Rishonim, the principle of Yatsa Motzi applies. That we know this halacha, you have an obligation, let's say on Rosh Hashanah, you have an obligation to hear shofar. So when you hear the 100, you hear your tekiah, so therefore you get your mitzvah. But there's the halacha is if you don't only baal tekiah in the town, you could go around blowing 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, even with brachas. How could you make it again? So the Rishonim point out, based on Yatsa Motzi, that you yourself haven't fulfilled your own personal obligation until every Jew in that town has heard shofar. Similarly, every Friday night. Even if you made Kiddush, but if you know other people haven't heard the Kiddush, so there's a communal responsibility as well. There's personal responsibility, communal. So we'll discuss a little bit about the mitzvah of Hochiach Tochiach Es HaMisecha, the mitzvah of Tochacha. In terms of, on one hand, we know we're all responsible for one another. We can't say, even though we live in a society of tolerance, which there's some good to that as well, but mind your own business, don't get involved with anyone else. We see it's not always that way. Sometimes it is our business, and we'll have to see exactly the parameters when it is our business, when it's not, etc. So the Mefarshim point out there seems to be an apparent contradiction in 2 Gemaras in terms of the Indian of Tochacha. So there's a Gemara in Yavamas on Daf Samachay Amabeis. The Gemara tells us this, like we know, based on the principle you're responsible for one another. There's a mitzvah. If you see another person doing something wrong, you have a mitzvah to rebuke them, to teach them, etc. However, the Gemara says, but also the reverse. But just like there's a mitzvah to tell someone to do something that's going to be listened to, so too, right, we'll get to that, right? So too, there's a mitzvah sometimes to say nothing if you know your words aren't going to be listened to. In fact, we'll see Rabbi Yehuda Chassid writes, perhaps you're over l'fnei iver, lo sitei michshol. Why bothering telling someone about something you know he's not going to listen? So there's a Gemara that says, just like it's a mitzvah to give tochacha, sometimes you fulfill the mitzvah by saying nothing. And in fact, there was a Maisa with one of the Hasidish Rabbeim in, I think it was in Europe probably, and there was this banker who was like a maskil, and I guess he always tried speaking to him, and or everyone else tried. He realized there was no point in trying to tell him about Shabbos, kosher, etc. So one time he went with the Gabbai. He told the Gabbai, take me to this guy's house. So he comes in, he lets him in, and he just sits down on the couch, and he's just sitting there, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So the banker calls over the Gabbai and says, what does the Rebbe want? I have no idea, he didn't tell me. So he's sitting there, and then about 2 hours later, whatever, an hour, 2 hours, make up any time you want, he says, okay, I'm ready to leave. So he got this guy's curiosity, like, But why, Rabbi? Why would you zilcha to my why was I zilcha to your presence? Like what? He said it doesn't. There's no point in telling. It doesn't make a difference. I'm not going to tell you, etc. Until he goes on until he finally gets out of him. He says because the Gemara says in Yavamas that there's a mitzvah to rebuke someone when they're going to listen. I know you're not going to listen. So how do I fulfill the second half of the pasuk or the second part of the Gemara that there's a mitzvah to say nothing when you know you're not going to be listened to? To me, sitting in my home and you're somewhere else saying nothing, what kind of mitzvah is that? So how to actually go to your house to fulfill the mitzvah? So whether you have to go to the guy's house or not, that we could discuss. But that's the Gemara in Yavamas that just like telling there's a mitzvah to go ahead and give rebuke when you think it's going to be listened to. So too, it's a mitzvah to say nothing. However, there's another Gemara in Erekin and Daf Tez Zayin. The Gemara seems to contradict. The Gemara wants to know up until what point do I have to give tochacha? How much rebuke? What is my obligation? How many times? How often? What do I have to do to keep on telling you stop doing this, etc. So the Gemara says, as a whole discussion, the Gemara Rabbi Yochanan Ad Kedei Kolo. One opinion is until he's about to curse you out, then you don't have to be cursed out. You could stop right before that point, or Ad Kedei Haka, or right before he's about to hit you, etc. So from this Gemara, it seems to be that you give Torah, even it doesn't look like the guy's about to listen to you. He's about to curse you out, hit you, he's throwing you out. And yet the Gemara seems that there's a mitzvah of giving tochacha. What happened to the Gemara in Yavamas? It said there's a mitzvah not to give Torah. There's a mitzvah not to say anything. So that's what the Rishonim Achronim point out. It seems to be an apparent contradiction. But the Gemara in Yavamas, don't be quiet, don't say anything. And if you see someone and you don't think he's going to be listening to you, should you give tochacha? From the Gemara in Yavamas, it seems not. And from the Gemara in Erekin, yes, but get out without any damage before he curses you out or you get hit. So which one is it? So the different shitas among the Rishonim. There's an interesting explanation. The Shita Mekubetis brings down in Baba Metzia and Avram Aleph from the Ramach, Ramosha Cohen. He gives a psychological insight. He seems to say there is no contradiction. In other words, especially we know today in the world of Kirov, of getting people, we live in a world, many non-observant Jews, and the many now official Kirov organizations, Asia Torah or Sameach, other programs, constantly people are doing all the time, Kirov, NCSY, etc. We know you have to keep in mind the big picture, and just like we do have a concept in halacha, that's a separate issue, in terms of sometimes even do you violate a small avera in order to prevent someone to event the bigger one? That's a discussion. But either way, the point being is, we don't just look short at it right now. You try to look at the big picture. If you realize by doing things, if you get them to come to shore, get them to do whatever these things are, ultimately in the long run, hopefully it will work out. So what the Ramach is saying here is, no, the mitzvah is, you're right, when the person's not listening to you, mitzvah to keep quiet. But probably what's the worst response you could get is indifference, nothing. The guy is like totally ignoring you, he doesn't even care, he's not even goris you. In those cases, yeah, you're right, then it's a mitzvah to keep quiet. But he's saying is, the fact that the guy's getting angry, the fact he's about to hit you, that means you're hitting a chord inside on a psychological level, and it is being Nishma. Even though it might not be Nishma right now, but whether it's going to be next week, next year, 20 years from now, his kids, wherever it's going to come up, somehow you see you got some type of, whatever the message is, it's unclear, but you got the fact that, I don't mean he's getting upset because you're agitating him, and there's different reasons of getting upset when he's in the middle of eating dinner and you're bothering him, but I mean, no special thing. You hit a chord inside that he probably realizes he's doing something wrong, he should change, but he's not, whatever the issues are. But that's how the Ramach says. It's not a stira. The Gemara is saying that. Gemara is saying here you are getting a response. The fact that the person's getting angry, even though it's not the ideal response, you want the response to be, great, let's go to shore, let's do that. But that could be, it's a response perhaps in the right direction, and therefore it's not considered words that aren't listened to.
That still doesn't make It's a nice psychological explanation, but the next day, the whole problem is, right, Mutav Shogig, and we want him to be B'Shogig, and now he's not going to be B'Shogig.
We'll see what, we'll get, that'll be the next, right, we'll get to that.
Okay, listen, 6 months from now doesn't help.
No, right, but then that'll be our next point right now, right? Joel's on to the next issue. So, right, it's a nice psychological stuff, then we have to take it further. So, as Joel's alluding to, we're going to get to a concept, we know the Gemara tells us in Be'ah and Daf Lamed, the Gemara is talking about the context of Yom Kippur, actually Tosefes Yom Kippur. We all know that's the only clear-cut one, that we know there's a mitzvah of Tosefes Yom Kippur, and they learn up in the Pasuk, it says Tisha, what do you mean, it's a 10. So we learn out that there's a mitzvah daraisa of Tosefes Yom Kippur. Regarding the other Tosefes Shabbos, Tosefes Yantiv, that's a machlokas rishonim in terms of whether you extend it to Shabbos and Gemara seems to extend it in Yuma, but the rishonim were indifferent. Perhaps the Rambam doesn't even have a concept of Tosefes Shabbos, but it's a machlokas among the rishonim. We usually assume as well Tosefes Yantiv and Shabbos is also deraisa, but that's a discussion. But Tosefes Yom Kippurim, that's clear. And in fact, that's what we do in the Tefillah Zaka. Before we accept, before Yom Kippur we say, and then at the end, Hareini Makabel Kedushas Yom, we make the Kabbalah Bepeh in terms of accepting the Kedushas Yom Kippur. So the Gemara over there says, in fact, the Gemara even has a Havamina that Tosefes Yom Kippurim is so part of the day, Yochel Yechayev Kares. I might even think that if you do malacha, if you eat during that time period, you might be chayev kares. Kamash Mala, no, we know Etzem Yom Hazeh you need exactly on Yom Kippur. But the Gemara has a havamina to think even during Tosefes Yom Kippurim, if you eat, you are chayev kares. So they point out that. So the Gemara says, so what's the issue? So the Gemara says there are some people who are eating during this time of Tosefes Yom Kippurim. So what's the problem? Go tell them not to eat. Someone's doing something wrong. Hochiach tochiach es amisecha. You tell them, and I'm sure they'll stop right on the spot and they'll listen to you. The Gemara says it's not so simple. Everything's not black and white. The Gemara says, I'll tell you what the problem is. There is a downside, as Joel alluded to, because there's another concept, mutav she'eshogim alte mizidin, that right now the assumption is anyway that perhaps they're peshogim. They don't know. They don't realize it's Tosefes Yom Kippurim yet. They don't know there's a concept, but they're doing it b'shogeg. But if you tell them, if they don't listen to you, they continue on, they're going to be violating it, this Aveira b'mezid. So the Gemara gives us a principle, better than if you don't think, or you never know 100%, but you don't think the person's going to listen to you, it's always going to be a judgment call. Better to have the person violate a sin b'shogeg and not to do it amazing. So that's the Gemara's call. So we see from
if it's
so we get to the
Gemara.
Right. So the Gemara. So what do we see from this Gemara? We see this. Well, we see from this Gemara. Tosefes Yom Kippur is deraisa. We know, and the Gemara saying even on the deraisa, we're saying for the Rabban in this room to be meko, but even on the deraisa we see the Gemara says. You might think, okay, Drabanan better to be shogig the Mezid. But Tosefes Yom Kippur is a deraisa, and yet the Gemara says better mutav shogig and better to violate Yom Kippur b'shogig and not, or Tosefes Yom Kippurim than to do it. So based on this, the Rishonim, the post can point out that it's true Tosefes Yom Kippurim is deraisa. However, we know there are chilukim, there are differences even within deraisa. That we have a concept, something which is mefurish bikra, something which is, it's explicit in the pasuk in terms of onshin. It's true Tosefes Yom Kippurim is deraisa, but it's not mefurish bikra. It's a drasha. You're not going to find it if you open up the chumash. In fact, so we have not only on deraisas but the rabbanans, the Pri Megadim rights. That's why it's this concept of asmachtas. There's a concept in the Gemara. Many times they quote dinim like, dinim d'Rabbanan, but then they give them psukim to back it up. Some say there's no difference. Others say the Pri Megadim writes that the asmachta is giving it. It's got, it's like you have mafurish bikra and you have drasha. It's a higher. Not all durabbanans are equal. Those durabbanans which you find in asmachta too. I mean, we find, but the ones that are there, the Gemara tells us about. So then they have a stronger status. In fact, we know the Rambam himself makes distinctions between, let's say, a hekish and a gzeira shava. Because the Rambam, let's say, by Kedushay Shtar, the first Mishnah in Kedushin, the different ways of being Makadesh a woman. So the Rambam is going to say Kedushay Shtar is Daraisa. How does he know it's Daraisa? Because the Yatza v'Haisa, he makes the Hekish. It's like we have halacha that she goes out with a get, so too you go in with Kedushin. And how does the Gemara learn out from Gzeira Shava? Kika Misayafra, the Gemara learns out Kedushay Kesef. So the Rambam, whatever, there's a whole discussion what the Rambam holds, but he calls it Divrei Sofrim. What Divrei Sofrim means, that's a separate shir. They discussed, I think it was out in the Vatican, where Rabbi Blech came a couple of years ago, Benjamin Blech, teaches at YU. He was, I think he went to the Vatican to speak about that, and I think so he didn't know if he had access to any of the Sfarim, so he spoke to different Rosh Yeshiva. If I have a chance to look up something, what should I look up? I think he asked Rav Schechter. So see what the Lashon of the Rambam is by, Kedusha is the right to. So, but on this, there's the whole the whole shtickle Torah is on this Rambam itself. But the point we come out is the Rambam holds that clearly that a hekish seems to be a more mafurish v'kra, while a gzeira shava is only going to be different. Even if you assume divrei sovrim is daraisa, to drasha, but it's still not mafurish. In fact, it's interesting Gemara in Gittin, I think Daf Samech. There's an interesting machlokas in the Gemara about what is Rov HaTorah. Is Rov HaTorah Torah Shebeksav, or is Rov HaTorah Torah Shebapet? So which seems to be like what kind of machlokas. Go to anyone's library. You maybe can fill up a full shelf of Torah Shebeksav if you're lucky. You have a bunch of Tanakh. But the rest, 90% of your library is Torah Shebapet. So that's what the Achronim point out. It's the issue. What exactly is considered Mefurish Bakra? What's considered Torah Shebeksav? Where do the Yud Gimel Midas fit in? So if Yud Gimel Midas are Torah Shebeksav, so that's a whole discussion. So we find that throughout the different levels. So even on the Rises, it could be different. Onshin, we know in general, as a general rule, Halach Moshe Mistina, you don't have Onshin on. So depending on how direct, it's like we have a concept of a grum and indirect in a different context, but same here, the more something's explicit, the more weight it covers. That's what they point out. So even though it's true, Tosefes Yom HaKippurim is Daraisa, but it's not Mefurish Bakra. So I think so they bring down maybe in Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, or other posts can bring down that perhaps in this halacha of Muter Yeshogegin, you see it applies to Tosefes Yom Kippur, so we see it applies to a Daraisa. However, something which is Mefurish Bakra, but something which is Mefurish in the Chumash, that you can't say Muter Yeshogegin. So the question is, what's the pshat? The Darkei Moshe asks, what's the pshat? Why should there be a distinction? So the Ramah suggests perhaps it's the perception. In other words, meaning the assumption, I should say, that when something is learned in drasha, so maybe someone didn't hear of Tosefes Yom HaKippurim, quite possible. However, something which is a mefurish v'kra, something which is a pasuk in the Chumash, everyone knows that. So of course they're doing it b'mezid anyway. So therefore it doesn't make a difference. That's what someone is to make a distinction. If it's mefurish v'kra, then you might as well give the token. They're doing it anyway, and of course they know about it. But it's something which isn't mefurish v'kra, so then you have that concept. Later, Achronim point out, unfortunately, Bizman Hazeh.
Doesn't the Gemara? Sorry, it's been 25 years. Yeah. But doesn't the Gemara deal with that? Doesn't the Gemara actually ask that question and then say, no, even something which is Mefurish B'Kra, it's still Mutashit?
No, the Gemara goes into, then it's a discussion. The Gemara I don't think the Gemara says that last line there, but the Gemara goes into
It goes by steps.
Yeah, it goes.
If it's
so.
Derbanan, Deraisa.
Yeah, the Gemara does touch on it, but different Rishonim, Achronim, exactly how they learn Pshat in the Gemara. But the Gemara does goes through the whole process, and
including each step.
Yeah. And in the Lumdis, people learn the Gemara differently, right? But so they point out.
It just seems that the logic's also a little bit round though, because the things that are obvious, that are straight from the Torah, so everybody knows that. So the fact that they're not doing it, it's bemazed in any case. So
the fact that doing and not doing it is they are bemazed.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's what we're saying. So therefore, there's no point giving tochacha because they're.
Right, so there's no point in giving.
No, I mean there's no point. There's no point not giving tocha. There's no downside. They're doing it.
Made it anyway.
There's no downside.
There's no downside from the point from the point that you're going to say that you're going to be telling them something now.
That's right.
No, but there's no point in telling them because they're not going to say yes because they know already.
We'll get to that question. But that's not the Gemara's. That's a good point. We're going to get to. Right. But the Gemara's point was only on base. We're only discussing in contrast to whether you should do a sin b'shogeg or mesa. That's all. You're right. We're going to get to that point next.
That's the only purpose of lahabchin. Right, b'shogeg or mesa. So, if a person is doing something knowing it's bemazed, there's no requirement for tochacha or esra because he already has been muvchan already.
Well, that
halacha was muvchanat. I don't know how you work it that way.
We're going to touch on that. That'll be our next point in a minute. So, is there a concept to give someone who's doing it bemazed and he won't listen? Is there any point? That's what we'll get to shortly. So, this getting back, that's what they point out. So, some want to make a distinction. Basically, the Gemara does discuss it, but in terms of whether perhaps even today, something which is, the Gemara talks about it, but people want to say, but even if it's mefurish b'kra, they're saying the Gemara was talking during a time where if it was mefurish b'kra, people knew about it. I'm saying, one could, but over here, bisman hazeh, the fact that you're mefurish b'kra doesn't mean anything. I don't know, shad is mefurish b'kra, whoever heard of shad, I'm sure we could go through a list of mitzvahs which are mefurish b'kra, and many people look at you like you're crazy. I mean, no, you're crazy anyway, but they would never heard of it. Crazy. So they point out. So therefore, so perhaps if that's the reason, so then perhaps even if it's even today, if it's mefurish b'kra, there is a downside because perhaps even if it's mefurish b'kra, people don't know about it, and you're going to tell them. So that's a discussion, because that's what the Gemara says. But then they want to say perhaps there is a downside, even if it is mefurish b'kra today, because those people who don't know even that. So that's the whole discussion. So that's what they point out. So someone explain. That's the Gemara. The Gemara in Yavamas, which says to keep quiet. That's the guy's doing a b'shogeg. So better mutav yeshogegin than to be mazid. But the person in Eric and Ted Zion, that's a person who's doing it b'mazid anyway. So therefore you do it until you don't have to get hurt doing it until he curses you out or hits you. That's how some Achronim want to point out. However, on both of your points, so what are we saying then? Is there a concept if someone is bemazed? So we're saying if bemazed, there's no downside. But then what about? But is there any upside? You think? Let's say, in general, yes, the person is bemazed, so maybe your rebuke, you know how to talk to them, and they'll change them. But let's say in a case where he's bemazed, and you went through it, 500 people before you never know anything, but assuming all the so-called experts in Kiruv or whoever, they did the speaking to it, whatever clear means, it's clear this person's not, so is there still a mitzvah? Are we saying that when it's bemazed and he's not going to listen to you, you still should give him tocha? That's the question we'll discuss now. So it's a machokas rishonim, achronim. The Yereim writes, the mitzvah of tochacha is even if a person's mazed, even if he's mazed, and even if he's not going to have any impact, he says nevertheless, there's a mitzvah hochiach lochiach esamisecha. And others, Tosas and Baba Kama, Daf Samach, says, what are you talking about? Even if it's bemazed, but the mitzvah of tochacha is goal-oriented. There's a reason we want to make this person better. Do a couple more things, etc., or do less of the wrong things. But there has to be some goal. Even if you're bemazed, if there's no benefit, then you keep quiet. Even if he's bemazed, it doesn't make a difference. If there's not going to be any end goal here, then who cares? I don't make it this shogeg mazed. Don't bother. If anything, you just make him a more hardened criminal or whatever. So therefore, it's not the machlokas rishonim on whether if someone's sinning bemazed, and your assumption being he's not going to listen to you, is there any concept of tocha? So what is the issue here? Is machlokas rishonim. So there's an interesting Avnei Nezer on this, but this before that, this Pashtus is what's the purpose of Tochacha? In other words, like in general, let's say you have you go to any, something's happening, you have these protests, you want to make a macha. So there's always, two reasons why whether you know them or not, there's two reasons why you make a macha. Macha protest. So, a lot of people say it's kavod shamayim, or it's kavod shamayim, or some other kavod, but whatever the reason they make a macha is, so let's say, when they were protesting, I remember when I was in New York, when they tried to get the Jews out of the Soviet Union, Russia, so we had that was a separate machlokas, whether that was actually effective. Rabbi Teitz's shita was, you're making it worse for the Russian Jews there. It's easy for you to do it, but he said better to send letters to your Congress. Everyone agrees to do something. The question is, but let's assume making a protest is a good thing. So they pointed out, number one, you want to get your goal. It's obviously a goal. Whatever you're protesting, you want it stopped. But even if it's not stopped, there's something for you. In other words, if you see something happening, you have to make a macha. Like they say over at the Brisker Rav. We had a couple weeks ago the Medrash about the three advisors to Paro. There was Yisro, Eov, and Bilam. So the Chazal tell us it was the Gemara, and so to discuss the Midah Keneged Midah, that Bilam said, kill the Jews, so we know what happened to Bilam and Bor, Hargu B'charev, and then Yisro gave up a prominent position, he had to run to Midjan, so his kids became descendants later on became on the Sanhedrin. But the question is Eov. Eov kept silent, so he was a life of pain. So the question is, I understand the other two Midah Keneged Midah, but what is not speaking up have to do with living a life of tsar? So the many different explanations, but the Brisker Rav says along these lines, like he doesn't give this example, but he says it's basically, it happens in camp a lot, but I guess at home also. Sometimes you take a shower and all of a sudden the water just gets boiling hot, and then you jump out, you scream, ah, and your back's all burnt. So the question is, does screaming take away the scar on your back? Of course not. But if it hurts, just scream. He said it in Yiddish. So too, if someone, other Jews, other people aren't suffering and you're indifferent, so therefore you have to feel the pain. That's what's immediate. So, however, the pshat is, but you have to make a macha. So, Pashtus Ureya might be saying that in a macha is also for you as well. And even if there is no impact, then maybe the others are saying it's, as we'll see, we'll get to it. So that's what the Avnei Nezer discusses. The Avnei Nezer has a whole long discussion on it. He wants to tie it into the topic of Darshinan Taima Dekra. We've spoken about many times. There's a concept Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda Rav Shimon on whether you can take the reason for the mitzvah or the avera and limit or expand the scope of the mitzvah. In other words, the Mishnah in Bava Metzia, Daf Kuftes Vav, talks about the case of the almana, the widow. So the Torah tells us not to take collateral from a widow because perhaps that's her only pill or only coat and she needs it. So the Gemara wants to know, great, what about a rich widow? Could you take it from her? So that's what Rehuda says, Eino Darshinan Taima Dekra. The Torah tells me I can't take collateral. That's it, I can't take collateral. She's rich, like Darshinan Taima Dekra. And Rav Shimon says, no, Darshinan Taima Dekra. Presumably the reason is because she was rich. She was, Amana is poor, she has no one supporting her. But someone wealthy, you do it. So that's the machlokas in the Gemara and the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon. So they point out, it seems to be a steer in Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda writes, by the case of a king, the Torah tells us not to have many kings. Yeah, Rabbi Yehuda says, many wives, right? Mm-hmm. But Rabbi Yehuda says, but he can. So why? Because he says, because as long as they don't take you away, they don't go Yosef Levo, they don't take you away. I thought he said, no, that she didn't time in the cross. That's what the Gemara says. No, when it comes to something which is mafurish, bekra, something which is written in the pasuk, the reason, so then everyone agrees with Darshin and time in the cross. The whole machlokas Rabbi Yehuda Rav Shimon is in a case where it's not mafurish, bekra. And that's what then they point, the different examples by the Russian Torah, by Ksiva Sefer Torah, that Bismana that perhaps the mitzvahs change, that they say the mitzvahs to write Svarim, to take note to the Shir. I thought Taryag mitzvahs are eternal. So what do you mean? So how can mitzvahs change? So they point out because the Torah tells gives the kisochem belam. The Torah tells gives the reason to write the Torah so you can learn from it. So it used to be they used to go into the Aron Kodesh and take out the Torahs and learn from them. Today they just a Sefer Shel Kavod. We bring them out once in a while, a couple of times a week, but that's not a real Iker Limud Torah. So therefore, the mitzvah is always for Limud Torah, except that the mitzvah is changed. That's what they also point out. Halanas Hameis, that you always bury the body right away. However, but let's say a relative is, a close relative has to come in, so it's all about Kavod Hameis. So Kavod Hameis, if it's not Kavod Hameis, we permit you. So that's what Rabbi Nezer points out, that Darshin and Taibnik, what does that have to do with Tochacha? So he points out there's a machlokes, Rashi and Ramban, how you learn the pasuk Hochiach Tochiach Es Amisecha, that you shouldn't, tzisa lo chet. So it shouldn't lead to sin. So what does that mean? So Rashi learns, he's telling you in the manner of how you give Tochacha. He's just saying is, be very careful that when you give Tochacha, don't make the situation worse than it is. You're giving a Tochacha over some quote-unquote minor thing, and you're going to embarrass the guy barabim, you're going to embarrass it, or you're going to do... So be very careful that when you're doing it, of course there's a mitzvah of doing it, but make sure when you do it in an appropriate manner, that you don't cause more harm than good, that you don't make the Tochacha worse than the actual sin. That's how the Rashi learns. The Ramban and other Rishonim learn differently. The Ramban learns, no, this is the essence, this is what Tochacha is all about. The purpose of Tochacha is to make that person a better person, that he shouldn't come to sin. And it's all the whole purpose of the Tochacha is result oriented. So therefore the Avnei Nezer points out, perhaps if you want to say like this is, when do we say the whole machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon, when you're darshin on time at the Kra, that whole machlokes is only if something which is a mefurish b'kra. But something which is a mefurish b'kra, so then everyone agrees. So therefore, according to Rashi, we won't have an answer. But if you learn like the Ramban, that the Torah itself is giving me the whole essence of the Tochacha is to make sure a person doesn't sin, that he comes out better at the end. So therefore, if you're gonna give someone Tochacha, even if you're b'mezid, if the guy's doing the sin b'mezid, if you know there's not going to be an impact, and no impact probably means a negative impact, because every time you tell someone and it's nothing, it probably makes it even worse. So therefore, the Ramban saying, the Avnei Nezer is saying in the Ramban, that the reason is built in, and that's the pshat in those Rishonim, that they're learning like the Ramban, that it's kind of like Darshin and time at the Kra, that the reason is built in, and it's result oriented, and therefore it makes no sense to give someone who's, even if they're doing it sin b'mezid, but if you know they're not going to listen to you, there is no point. And in fact, you can even say, even if you don't want to go as strong as the Avnei Nezer and say this is mefurish b'kra, it's darshin and time at the Kra. Perhaps you could even say, we mentioned also, I think in the past, there's an interesting rush, the Shita Mekubetz's quote regarding the Aveira mitzvah of Sar Balei Chayim. The mitzvah in the Torah to make sure you don't cause harm. So actually it's a whole Gemara about Mitzvah. In fact, there's a whole discussion in the Gemara whether Sar Balei Chayim is Doraisa or Derabanan. The poskim assume it's Doraisa, however it's very unclear what is the source of Sar. So I think you have 10, 12, 13 different explanations in the Rishonim Achronim coming up with the source of Sar Balei. So in fact some bring down the story of Bilam with the donkey, from here we learn it out, and other different sources. So I think the Shita Mekubet is quotes to Rush. You know what the source is? The source is halacha of not to muzzle an animal when they're working. And presumably what's the reason for the Isur is because it's Sar Balei Chayim, that it's not right, it's working, it should be able to eat along the way. And that's how the Rush learns, that's the source of Sar Balei Chayim Daraisa. So they point out, so let me ask you something. There's an instant to muzzle your animal while it's eating. I mean, let's say while it's working. When you're eating, I guess it's, So they point out, so the animal is working in the field, but let's say this animal can't eat this food, the food is poisonous, it's going to be a thorn, it's going to kill him, injure him. So what will you say? Well, sorry, it says I can't muzzle you to go ahead and kill yourself. So the Rush writes a bigger chiddush. We always, many Rishonim say it has to be mefurish b'kra. That we could darshin on time at the kra, but it has to be mefurish b'kra. The Rush is saying even more than that. The Rush is saying when something is so obvious that that's the reason, if it's so obvious that that's the reason, then you could say the reason is built into the mitzvah. Then obviously you get into what's considered reasonable and what's not reasonable. But so what the Rush thinks is so obvious, and I guess to most people that's pretty obvious, if the whole purpose of the law is to protect the animal, so you're not going to do something to harm. So whether it's as obvious by tochacha or not, but if you want to take the Rush and use it here, if you don't want to go as far as the Avnei, it's mefurish b'kra, even if it's not, it's obvious the reason we give tochacha is to help the person. If by giving tochacha and he's b'meis it's not going to help, then one can make a strong argument that you should have, you shouldn't be doing. And in fact, today many say we don't even know how to give the tochacha, so you might even do being an aveira. That's we'll see Allah chay.
Is there a difference between Adam l'chavar and Adam l'makam? When you get tocha and a say what to say, it's all the same.
But
see somebody's geneva, you should be stumped. He's going to keep on doing it. So you get the same.
No, right. So that gets into it does get into the gedarma. Someone's about to murder someone. They don't spell out the specific cases, but based on the column. But ultimately, obviously, if you see, depending on how strong, so we discuss it. If it's more mefurish b'kra, less, and I'm sure in terms of killing, like avodah zarah, the thing, that I guess that you could say that's built into the logic here also.
Same thing.
Yeah, I'm just saying is, but there could be, I seen. There wasn't any like straight out rules, but I've seen some, maybe you can machalik between, you definitely, the rights of the Rabbanan, and whether it's been, but it's more, the focus on this is more whether it's going to be helpful or not. But with Saul's point, of course, if someone's about to murder someone or kill, or steal, then obviously the doubt, depending on how bad the sin is, that makes it less downside. So therefore, there's more reason to give the tochacha, because if a person's going to do this cardinal sin, then scream at him 100 times. So then in those cases, that's why Ben Am also, depending what Ben Am would talk about, if someone's about to hit someone else, then what's the downside? It's not the issue of shogeg. The issue is to protecting the individual. So, there are distinctions. I see them on the Achronim throw out different things, but I guess a lot of it also is. Is figuring out this mefurish b'kra severity, but it's more weighing the risk of like the downside versus the upside. But in those cases, you're right. So then everyone should agree that even if he's b'mezid and you don't think, but what's the harm? Logically, it would make sense, if someone's not helping someone cross the street versus someone's about to, mug some, those type of things. So they're built into the program. So that's what they want to point out, that if you assume that way. So, number one, to a distinction, some want to make a distinction between Mezid and Shogeg. The Gemara in Yavamas, which says the mitzvah to keep quiet, that's when a person's doing it for Shogeg, because then Mutzah is Shogeg Mezidin. But if you're doing it for Mezid, then you tell them, Akadei Hakah, Akadei. But we just pointed out that those Rishonim, if we learn like the Ramban and the Avnei Neser, that even if it's b'mezid and they're not going to listen, some of the Uraim says there's still a mitzvah of tochacha in that case, but others say, if they're not going to listen, there isn't. So we try to make a further distinction. In addition to the Mezid Shogeg, the Rad, I think the Rashba, they point out, they want to make a distinction between, there's one of the distinctions they make, also a Yachid versus a Tzibur. That they want to make a distinction if you're giving Tochacha to a Yachid versus giving Tochacha to a Tzibur. So when the Gemara says, you're saying mitzvah to keep quiet, there's a mitzvah to, if they're going to listen, but be quiet, that's referring to a tzibur. But when you're dealing with the yachid, again, working within those, a further thing, assuming that even b'mezid, those, according to those Rishonim, will say even b'mezid, and they're not going to listen, you don't give it to them, there's no point, so then perhaps the distinction would be, is Yachid versus Tzibur, that for a Yachid, there's more of an Indian to give Tochacha, but when you're talking to a group of people, I guess they're not counting Musa Shmuzim and all that when you're giving all the Musa all the time. But when you're talking to so what's the distinction? Why make a distinction between a Yachid and a Tzibur? They say the Gemara in Erechen is talking about a Yachid Ad Ketei Akah, and the Gemara in Yevamos is talking about a Tzibur, because it's the concept that maybe there's no maybe the Ran saying there's no fundamental difference between the halacha of Tocha to a Yachid and Tzibur, but he's going on the Yisod of the Ramban that it's goal-oriented. That also it's Amisecha. It's Amisecha, or someone who you have some type of kesher with, you have some type of similarity. So with a Yachid, you have a better chance of being successful. With the Tzibur, when you talk, because everyone says you're talking to the other person. When the rabbi is giving the sermon or whoever, oh yeah, I know who he's talking about. When it's always not to you, it's to someone. So when you're talking to a Tzibur, who knows who he's talking to? But the person's talking to you, so they want to make that fundamental distinction. So this to summarize. So we had the apparent contradiction, the Gemara in Yevamos and the Gemara in Erechen. The Gemara in Yevamos is like it's a mitzvah to give rebuke when they're going to listen, the mitzvah not to when they won't. And the Gemara in Erechen, which seems to say no, even if they're not listening, keep on going up until that point where they're going to curse you out. So we had the Ramach who wanted to give the psychological insight that no contradiction. You're hitting a chord, you are getting through to the guy, keep up the work, just get out before he hits you. Or like the other Rishonim, the whole discussion, we went into Tosefet Yom Kippurim, Mefurish B'Kra, Drush, etc., all the distinctions, D'Oraisa, D'Rabbanan, Torah Rabbi, that if you're doing it, when do we say not to give the Tochacha, when the person's doing it B'Shogeg? Because better to do it B'Shogeg than B'Mezid. However, the Gemara in Erechen is talking about B'Mezid. And we point out, but they're even, that's a Machlokas Rishonim, is that true? That if a person's doing it b'mezid and he's still not going to listen to you do it anyway, that the Uraim says yes, Tosa seems to say no. And what's in the Kudah? The Aldaineza built up the whole Yisod about the Rashina and time at the Kra, and if the Machlok is Rashi and Ramban, and what's not to cause the person to sin, the Rashi words is just the manner. Nothing to do about the essence of Tocha, just be careful how you do it. But the Ramban says that's the essence, is the person, it's a result oriented, it's to better the person, and therefore even Rabbi Yehuda agrees when it's Mefurish B'Kra, Darshin and time at the Kra, and therefore that's why there's no need to give Tochacha when the person's been made and he's not going to listen. So we point out according to them, so then what? So then perhaps the further distinction is, even maybe he's only saying that if you've been made and you're not going to listen, if you're B'Tzibur. But if you're not going to listen, maybe in a Yachid, at least there's one more to talk about, because that there's some type of kesher, maybe you'll find some link and you'll get back. And that's the Yisod. So, because, as we said, Kol Yisrael Re'um Zelazeh, ultimately, Yatzamotu, responsive for one another, so there is an element of Tochacha, but we see when you go through the sources, it's not as broad as, one might think, and one has to be very careful when they give Tochacha, that they're doing it at the right time, and Ben like Rashi, that in the manner you're giving it, and like the Ramban, that make sure you're doing it in a way that's going to better the situation. If you're not sure it's going to better the situation, then better work with the Gemara in Yevamos, that it's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut at different times.